ربي ذو الجلال والإكرام يا إلهي فاعف عني.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this training session on the power of habits organized by Islamic Circle of Australia and New Zealand. Habit is something which is highly influential for our life. 48% of what we do is because of our habits. And during that time, we are not actively aware of what we are doing and why we are doing it. All of us in some point in our life have tried to build some good habits, but have sometimes failed. And all of us have tried to break some bad habits and have failed at that too. So it is extremely important that we understand how habits work, how we can make them, and how we can break them. And this is what we are going to do in this training session. This session would comprise of 3 parts. Part 1 would focus on the habits of individuals. Part 2 will discuss the habits of organization. And in Part 3, we will uncover the secrets behind habits of nations. So please stay tuned. It is an extremely important and a highly useful training. I strongly recommend you to watch all of it. So we'll begin with our first part today. Thank you. We will now start our first session. The title of this training is The Art of Making and Breaking Habits, and this is based on a New York Times bestseller book, The Power of Habits. Having said that, we have amended and added some additional details wherever we found necessary. Before we begin, let's see how does this training fit with some of the other trainings that Islamic Circle of Australia and New Zealand has conducted. Our first workshop in Perth was based on strategic visions. In that workshop, we clarified that all of us have got various roles. Some of us are fathers, husbands, sons, employees, employers, and we've got a number of other roles. Our vision in life should be focused on vision in each and every one of these roles. We cannot just focus on one role and ignore all the others. For example, we have seen some people who want to be great sports people or great actors or great businessmen, but they do so at the cost of some of the other roles in their lives. Some of the great businessmen do not have good family lives. Some of the best actors do not enjoy the best health or the best mental stability. So Islamically, what we know is that for all these roles, we have got an MPL, the minimum performance level, below which we cannot go. So that is what we study in the Strategic Visions workshop. Now, if you've got so many roles, and for each role we have got a minimum performance level that we have to meet. We cannot abandon our parents, we cannot abandon our kids, we have to play the role of bread earner, we have to play the role of being an ummati of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then we have to manage time. That is why the next workshop that we did was based on strategic time management. And while we were doing that workshop, we discussed various components or various aspects of time management. We understood that we have to have determination. In the absence of that, we cannot manage our time. We should be able to prioritize our work, and we discussed various tools and techniques that we can use to manage that. And the third important concept that we understood in that training was that we have to develop DMRs. DMR stands for discretionary mental routines. These are the things that we automatically execute. Once we repeat these things a number of times, they become our second nature, they become our habit, and then they automatically get executed, freeing our brain to do a number of other activities. So in that manner, they save us a lot of time and are highly beneficial for us. But having said that, if we develop bad DMRs or DMRs for the things which are not very productive for us, then it would easily take us to destruction. It is therefore very important to understand how does this all work, and that is where habits come in. So this session would try to explain further on the DMRs and the role of habits in our lives and discuss how we can make productive use of this very important aspect. Now let's come to the definition of habits. Habit is defined as the choices that all of us deliberately make at some point and then stop thinking about, but continue doing, often every day. So this is what is our habit. What does it mean? That we initially gave a lot of thought to that particular routine or that particular habit when we were doing it. But as we did it a number of times, we stopped thinking much about it, and it automatically executes. We'll explain it with some examples as we go along. The first example is about driving the car. When you sat in the driving seat of the car for the first time, there were a number of things that you were thinking about, and there were a number of things that you were highly cautious about. The location of the mirror, where should you put your hands on the steering, where should you look when you are driving, what is that guy behind you doing, is there any car too near to you, are you too near the curb, what's happening in your surrounding, is the road clear? All these things, our brain was fully occupied with all these details. But now, if you have driven this car for a number of years, then a lot of these things become automatic. You do not actively or cautiously think about all these details. And that frees up your brain to do other things. You know what's happening on the radio, you know who the person sitting next to you is talking, what he's talking about. You know, you are able to think about a number of other things. How does it happen? Because your brain has developed a habit of driving the car. It executes many things automatically, freeing up your brain to do other stuff. So why does our brain do what it does? The main reason behind that is that our brain is trying to reduce its effort. If it pays attention to every single thing that we do and every single detail that is around us, it would get overburdened and would cease to function. That is why it tries to make its life easier and put many of the things in the automatic mode. Whenever we receive a cue, it switches on one of the automatic modes on, and we execute a habit or a routine. So that is what our brain is trying to function. It is trying to put itself at ease and free itself for other things that we do in life. And that's what basically drives our habits. It would be a surprise for many of us that 48% of what we do every day is because of our habits. Now, it has got a positive as well as a negative side. The positive side is that if we develop good habits, for example, if we are doing zikr, whatever we are doing, that sort of habit, we won't have to pay much attention to what we are doing, and automatically we'll be doing that thing. We'll be receiving hasanat and reward by not even being actively aware of what we are doing. On the flip side, if we develop some bad habits like swearing or other things, we'll be doing that without being actively aware of that, and we will keep accumulating bad deeds. So it is very important, if habits control this much portion of our life, 48% of what we do every day, it is very important that we identify what they are and also control them. If we don't control our habits will control us. So that is why we are doing this training, so that we can identify our habits and take actions to enhance our good habits and break the bad ones. So what we are going to cover in this training, we'll start with the habit loop. So our routines or habits are basically formed of a loop. So the things in that loop happen in a sequential manner. We will discuss what that loop is and how does it help us in decision making in terms of making and breaking habits. We'll then discuss about functioning of our brain in relation to the habits, and we'll share with you some of the scientific experiments that have happened at MIT and the interesting findings that the researchers made over there. We'll then also discuss a very important concept of craving. So craving is something that really pushes the habits loop. If there's a craving, the habit loop would further strengthen. So we'll discuss what it is, how we can control the craving, and how we can even break it if it's not a healthy one. We will do some exercises on how to form habits. Those will be based on understanding the habit loop, but then we'll also have some specific checklists that we can use to facilitate us in building the new habits. We will also discuss how to break the bad habits. Another very important concept that we will be covering in this training is the keystone habits. So in many organizations, it happens that if people focus on one key habit, the benefits of that and the learnings from that spill over onto the other routines and on other activities of that business. So that's what the importance of keystone habit is. As Muslims, our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has also given us a few keystone habits. If we can develop those keystone habits, the benefits of those can spill over across whole of our life, and we would be really living a meaningful life. So we'll discuss what those keystone habits are in general as well as a Muslim. We'll also discuss the scientifically proven importance of belief in forming and breaking habits. We'll discuss some case studies which would clarify this concept that why is belief important in terms of making or breaking habits. Another very interesting aspect about this training is that we will discuss many marketing strategies that the common products like Pepsodent or some of the cleaning liquids or sunscreen or these products use. We'll discuss how they work and sometimes why they don't work. In the end, we will also discuss about how communities and companies can benefit from this science of habits. So you can see from this list that what we are going to cover would be extremely interesting and will be applicable to you in whatever field you are and whatever your interests are. You can form new habits and you can learn how to break your existing bad habits. Alright, so let's begin with an overview of some of the experiments that happened at MIT. What you see on your screen is a maze. At one end of the maze, a mouse was trapped. In front of the mouse, there was a door or a partition which could be opened by the researchers. Whenever it used to open, it used to make a click sound. Once the mouse was set free, the mouse used to wander around. That's what's happening. Where do I have to go? Sometimes it used to turn the wrong way. And then it used to turn towards where the reward was left, the chocolate.
The first point is that there's a trigger that awakens us, create that part.
Yeah.
Then there is a routine that goes into it.
That's right.
In this case, the rat just goes straight to the food and it knows where it is. He doesn't have to smell or stop or anything like that. Then there is a reward for it. In this experiment, the reward was a chocolate bar, and for mice, it was a happy treat.
That's right.
And,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, if there is no reward, then there is no point in remembering that habit. So
That's
our
correct.
mind doesn't
That's right.
store that.
So had there been no chocolate at the end of that maze, so the mouse would not have been interested in remembering that thing.
So in this experiment we have learned that when the mouse received a cue, which was a click sound, it then started its routine, and in that routine initially it was thinking a lot, but as it practiced the same routine a number of times after receiving the same cue, it transformed into a habit. And once the habit was formed, the mouse did not have to think much when executing that routine. So the brain activity decreased. We can see that from these graphs. You can see two graphs on your screen. The first graph is the mouse's mental activity when it was doing it the first few times. You can see when the click sound was made, the mouse was really thinking what was happening. Then when it reached the two sections within the maze, the thinking increased again that what's going to happen next. There was a lot of lack of clarity. There was a lot of doubt. So mouse was confused what to do and its brain was fully in a thinking mode. And when it reached ultimately the chocolate, its reward, you can see that the mental activity jumped very high. So the joyfulness section of the brain was activated. On the other hand, when we see the mouse's activity once the routine was formed, we can see that initially the mouse is having a higher brain activity, and that is when the cue is received or just before that. It is this decision point when the brain is trying to determine which habit I need to execute. Once it identifies the habit that is associated with that cue, it automatically executes that, and the brain activity goes right down and stays low until it reaches the end. And it is again at that point that the brain now thinks, what do I have to do next? So this explains to us that the brain activity and habits are very much linked to each other. At the start and at the end of the habit, we have got a high brain activity, and in the center, the activity reduces right down to the very bottom. Another interesting point to note here is that once we were exposed to the joy the first time, the joyfulness was much more. But when we kept on getting the same thing again and again, the joyfulness was reduced. So again, it can happen that over a period of time, our motivation can fade away. Then we have to alter our habits to accommodate for that and keep motivated to do that task if it's a good task. So we'll now move on to the next slide, which basically tells us or summarizes this experiment into a loop. So the cue is what basically triggers a routine. Then we follow that cue with a routine, which then ultimately leads to a reward. If the reward is not there, we will not remember the routine and the cue and will not be able to transform that into a habit. So we have to have a reward in order to convert our cue and routine into a habit.